Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. I think it's safe to say that all of you are here today because you are opposed to government censorship. Is that right? Have I got that broadly correct? Okay, we can agree on that much. Book banning is a form of government censorship. Is that, broadly speaking, correct? Professor Knox, you're an expert in this. Let me just ask you. Book banning is a problem under the First Amendment because it's the government telling private individuals, authors, what have you, what they can and cannot write, telling the public what they can and cannot read. Is that, broadly speaking, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So now, what if the books were digital only? Could the government ban them then? So no hard copies, no physical copies, it's just digital books. Could the government engage in book banning then under the First Amendment? No problem.
No, that's about a format of the particular book, and that really doesn't matter when it comes to whether or not government is banning a book.
Okay, what if the government made a list of authors whose books it wanted banned, and also went to all of the publishing houses in America, the government did, and said, do not publish the books by any of these authors or we will punish you? Is that a problem under the First Amendment?
My hope is that the government would not be involved in the decisions of a private company.
Good. I would hope so too, but apparently that is not the case in the United States of America today under this administration, because the hypotheticals I've just given you aren't hypotheticals at all. They've happened, and we know that they are happening. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals just ruled in a case, Missouri versus Biden. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. It's going to go down, I think, as a landmark case in the worst possible way in First Amendment law, because what the Court of Appeals found is that the White House, not just the federal government, but the White House actively coerced every major social media platform in America. Let me say that again. Every major social media platform in America to ban speech that the White House did not like. What are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about speech on the COVID-19 pandemic, speech on the 2022 congressional elections, speech related to mask mandates, speech related to vaccines. What did the White House do? Well, over a period of years, they met with, on a regular basis, the leaders of social media companies and demanded that the speech they did not like be taken down. They further demanded that these same social media companies amplify the White House's speech. Amazing. So take down all of this speech that we don't like, amplify our own speech. Unbelievable. What kind of speech are we talking about? Well, for example, not just public officials, but parents. Here's an example from my state, the state of Missouri. I'm reading you from the opinion here. One parent who posted on Nixdoor.com, which is a site operated by Facebook, posted an online petition to encourage his school to remain mask optional, found that his posts were removed without notifying him, and his friends never saw them. Another parent in the same school district who objected to mask mandates for school children responded to Dr. Fauci on Twitter and promptly received a warning from Twitter that his account would be banned if he did not delete the tweets criticizing Dr. Fauci's approach to mask mandates. These objections, amazingly, this censorship was taken at the direct behest of the federal government, the direct behest of the Biden administration. Professor Knox, is this a violation of the First Amendment?
Only a judge can make that determination.
And a judge has. I'm glad you said that. Multiple judges. The district court, federal district court, said there was a direct First Amendment violation. Court of Appeals unanimously, 3-judge panel, unanimously said direct First Amendment violation. I can't think of another time in American history when the President of the United States, and I say that advisedly because the record reflects that White House officials were sending emails and communications to these companies saying that the President himself wanted the censorship. So you've got the government doing exactly what Professor Knox said is not permitted under the First Amendment, directly coercing the speech of private parties, and not just one or two authors, but parents all across the country. Unprecedented in the history of this nation. So I'm glad we're having this hearing today. I hope that we will have more like it to expose the censorship happening at the highest levels of our government. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that this opinion, this judgment by the Fifth Circuit, Missouri versus Biden, be entered into the record in full.
Without objection.
I will leave it there. I know there are other Senator Kennedys here who want to ask questions, but I just want to say for the record that this kind of censorship is un-American, it is unconstitutional, and I hope it will go down as a sad chapter in American history that we can close here and now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I confess I'm a little confused, and I appreciate the argument or discussion that we've been having, but for me, it's a little too conceptual or, I don't know, metaphysical or theological or whatever you want to call it. I want to try to understand what you're asking us to do. Let's take two books that have been much discussed. The first one is called All Boys Aren't Blue, and I will quote from it. I put some lube on and got him on his knees, and I began to slide into him from behind. I pulled out of him and kissed him while he masturbated. He asked me to turn over while he slipped a condom on himself. This was my ass, and I was struggling to imagine someone inside me. He got on top and slowly inserted himself into me. It was the worst pain I think I have ever felt in my life. Eventually, I felt a mix of pleasure with the pain. Close quote. All Boys Aren't Blue. The second is another much discussed book. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's called Genderqueer. Okay? Let me read an excerpt from that. Quote, I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on you. It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly. You're going to look so hot. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth. I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life. Then I want you inside of me. End quote. Now, Mr. Secretary, what are you asking us to do? Are you suggesting that only librarians should decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available to kids? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. Tell me what you're saying.
Well, first of all, there's this...
Don't give me a speech. Tell me what you're asking me to do.
With all due respect, Senator, the words you spoke are disturbing, especially coming out of your mouth is very disturbing. But what I would also tell you that we're not advocating for kids to read porn, to Senator Booker's point.
What are you advocating for?
We are advocating for parents, random parents, not to have the ability, under the guise of keeping kids safe, to try and challenge the world view of every single manner on these issues.
You're getting conceptual game.
I'm not getting conceptual.
Well,
I'm saying
yes,
that
you are. Yes, you are. Because I want to know what you're recommending. It sounds to me like what some of you are saying, the librarians should decide who gets to see that book.
I'm saying when individual parents are allowed to make a decision of where that line is, and To Kill a Mockingbird, which involves a rape scene, should that book be pulled from our libraries? I think it becomes a slippery slope.
I think you ought to think about it a little bit more before you come here.
I've thought about,
if
Senator,
you're going to propose something, you ought to be able, in 30 seconds, to be able to explain what you're asking us to do. Ms. Kelly, what do you understand? Well, let me skip you for a second. Mr. Cameron, tell me what you're proposing.
It's pronounced mix.
Mix? Is that how would you like me to refer to you?
Senator, your definition of sexual is synonymous with LGBTQ identity.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you to tell me you read those two excerpts.
Genderqueer.
Do you think that, are you asking that only librarians and not parents have any say in whether minors can read those books? Is that what you're saying?
Genderqueer has never been in my school library, so it's never been banned.
Well, suppose it was. Should it be up just to the librarian, or should parents have a say?
There should be facilitation of collaboration between students,
Should parents have
and
a say?
educators. Parents should be working with students and educators to be making decisions because students are.
And who decides ultimately? The librarian, or do you take a vote, or who takes the vote?
Book review committees in the community in my school district.
You want a committee to decide?
There are committees.
Okay. Well, I'm asking you, how do we decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available in the library? What would you, if you were running things, what would you do?
All Boys Aren't Blue, the scene you mentioned, is about sexual abuse.
I know what it's about.
It's not
What
erotic.
would you do in terms of making the books available? Would you say anybody can see them, or they have to be in a special session?
Students who do not read books like All Boys Aren't Blue cannot learn what is appropriate.
I understand that.
They cannot learn.
I understand, but none of you want to
abuse.
answer my question. You come here and you say censorship is bad, and of course it's bad. But the obvious response is, okay, you heard the books we're talking about. Okay, we're not talking about Catcher in the Rye. So tell me what you want, who gets to decide. And all I've heard is the librarians. And parents have nothing to do with it. And if that's your response, what planet did you just parachute in from?
Parents, Senator.
Or what country, more appropriately? This is not China.
Parents, Senator, for all due respect, parents absolutely have a say. My parents were immigrants, came to this country. We never checked out books without our parents seeing what books we were reading. They encouraged us to read books.
Mr. Secretary, I understand this is good for your politics back home.
It's got nothing to do with my politics. My bill is passed.
Of course it does.
My bill is
It has
passed.
everything to do with your politics.
I'm here to.
But you came here with a problem, and I'm trying to understand the solution, and you don't have one.
We solved the solution.
Other than to tell us that we don't agree with you, we'll be on the wrong side of history.
We solved the problem in Illinois. We fixed it because we
well, there are others you could work on.
Well, that's why I'm
out
here to
of
help.
time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lee.
I'm going to be showing a video clip in just a second, but at the outset of this, I want to make clear, I think nearly every American could agree that parents have some legitimate interest in what their child reads or is taught or otherwise exposed to about sex. I think it's very, very difficult for anyone to disagree with that. Now, that being the case, I think we need to proceed with this conversation with that backdrop and that understanding. I'm going to play a video clip right now. The video clip is from Deborah Caldwell Stone. She's the legal counsel for the American Library Association. Here's what she has to say on some of these topics that deal not with book banning, because no one here has banned any book. You can still get these books anywhere you want them. The question isn't whether to ban them. The question is whether they should be included in curriculum or in a school library. A library or a school curriculum, by definition, will be finite. There are a finite number of books that you can put in there. The question is which books should be included and which should not. Let's hear what Ms. Deborah Caldwell Stone has to say on this topic.
But ultimately, we found that the thing that needs to happen most, and it needs to happen before these bills are introduced, is sustained messaging that reframes this issue, that takes it away from the idea that these are inappropriate for minors or sexually inappropriate for minors, and promote them as diverse materials and programming that are about inclusion, fairness, and the protection of everybody's right to see themselves and their families reflected in the books in the public library.
Okay, so I think what we saw here right now was someone saying the quiet part out loud, acknowledging what the goal is. There is a goal here, and the goal is to sexualize children to provide minors with sexually explicit material and then hide this content from the parents. Hide it by changing the messaging, avoiding the heat by saying, no, these are not the droids you're looking for. This is not about sexually explicit content. This is about equality. This is about justice. This is about what's right and wrong. It has nothing to do with sex. Well, of course that's what someone would do if they were grooming your child, if someone were trying to sexualize your child. And make no mistake, that is what's happening. You see, there has been something that has happened in the last few years. During COVID, a lot of kids had online school, and parents were able to observe in the classroom in ways that they haven't been in the past. Observe what was being taught, how it was being taught, and it's awakened something significant among parents throughout America, and that's why you've got groups that are standing up, groups of parents, places across the country, including Utah, like Utah Parents United, the American Accountability Foundation, and Ms. Neely's group, Parents Defending Education. They're providing parents with the tools they need and the information that they desire about how best to protect their kids from inappropriate things that they may be being taught or maybe being given at the school where they spend most of the best hours of most days of the week throughout the school year every year. Now, one of the explicit excerpts read by Mr. Eden just a few minutes ago and presented to this committee is from All Boys Aren't Blue, a book available without restriction in at least one Utah junior high school, attended by children ages 13 to 15, and at least 5 Utah high schools. In 3 Utah high schools, the book was available to children over 16. Now, remember, from what was shared with us from Mr. Eden, this book has some really graphic, sexually explicit stuff. This is pornographic. This is obscene. It's certainly not appropriate for children, and it is, no matter what else you think about it, it is something that is sexual in nature. And I really do think very few, if any, American could reasonably disagree with the statement that parents have an interest in what their children are taught when it comes to sex. And so the moment parents take reasonable steps to protect their children, and lawmakers honor those efforts to protect their children from exposure, then all of a sudden we've got a problem. And then the left and Vice President Harris cry book ban, even though all of these books are still available. You can still buy them, all of them. On Amazon, you can still buy them, all of them, all over the place. You can't, by the way, buy Ryan T. Anderson's book, When Harry Became Sally, on Amazon. That's been taken down from Amazon. But the point is this is not a ban. This is about schools deciding what's appropriate for school children. And sexually explicit, obscene, pornographic material isn't appropriate, and many parents are legitimately concerned about that. So I'm concerned about this in a variety of respects, and I'd just like to ask the question, Mr. Eden, is placing common sense age restrictions on pornographic content or removing sexually explicit books from school curriculum and school libraries, is that book banning? And does that carry any ramifications for what we would talk about in terms of the First Amendment, in terms of book banning in the First Amendment sense?
No, sir. No.
It does not. And why is that? Why is that not book banning? Why does that not offend the First Amendment in any way, shape, or form?
It's a question of community curation, and no student is actually blocked from acquiring the book in a broader sense.
So if you're providing content to a child, that if spoken to a child by you, by the school, if that would constitute, in some jurisdictions, in some circumstances, a crime or a tort, you've got a problem. These school districts are acting in response to legitimate parental concerns. They should be removing these. Shame on them if they don't, and shame on those who want to groom children sexually. Thank you.
So if you're a parent out there listening to this hearing, I would encourage you to advocate for your child. I would encourage you to go to the school district, the library, wherever you believe is appropriate on behalf of your child. You have an obligation as a parent to lend your voice to the cause you think helps your child develop in the right way. About this hearing, what is our role here? What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to take over every school board in the country and veto their decisions about what books go into public schools? In the library, I hadn't spent a lot of time in the library. That speaks poorly of me. But am I supposed to, as a United States Senator, take over the libraries of all of this country and be the final say of what goes in a library? I hope not. I think not. So this is an important hearing in this regard. It shows the difference of the two parties on this issue. School boards, whether elected or appointed in our system, should be the people we go to talk about what's in a school. A library board should be the group of people that decides what goes in a library. And if you don't like the outcome, at least you can complain. And to all the parents out there who believe there's a bunch of stuff in our schools being pushed on your children that go over the line, you're absolutely right. To governors and to local officials who want to make sure that agendas are not being pushed upon your children, you're right to speak up. In Burbank, California, some school districts banned Huckleberry Finn, To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't agree with that, but that was your right to make that decision. So what I want to leave with you, Mr. Chairman, is that we on this side, I think to a person, I understand what Senator Cornyn is saying, but he'll speak for himself in a minute. I don't think there's one person on our side of the aisle believes that we, the federal government, should be deciding these issues. And if you don't like the outcome, pick a school board you do like. And it's wrong for conservatives to try to pick school board members. It's absolutely okay for every liberal organization to destroy conservatives who make decisions they don't like. So we're not buying this. We're not going to be intimidated. To governors out there, I look to you for leadership on such issues. Some are providing it, and congratulations to you. To parents, don't give an inch on this. Speak up. Violence is never the answer. But show up, speak up, and a lot of the times the books that are being complained about by parents, you can't even read in the public hearing. And I won't read it today. But somebody needs to understand that this is a big issue for many parents in this country. And Mr. Chairman, this committee has done a lot of good work on social media reform. I like you. We worked on immigration. We can have our differences. But to me, here's what we should be talking about right now. And I'll be brief. As we talk about the federal government's role in deciding what goes in a library or a school, there's been 347% increase in illegal crossings since 2020. 183,000 people came over legally in July. We've had 146 people on the terrorist watch list. In FY22, which is about 2.4 million came across. Since President Biden's been president, 5.5 million people have come across illegally. That's bigger than the state of South Carolina. Last couple of weeks, smugglers with ISIS ties helped migrants enter U.S. from Mexico, raising alarm bells. I'd like to be talking about that. And matter of fact, you can go get the classified briefing. You ought to. It will scare you. And finally, it's just not me saying these things. New York City, the mayor, is at capacity. We have no more room in the city and we need help. This is a national crisis that begs for a national response since day one. The migrant crisis will destroy New York City. New York City will experience a financial tsunami. The mayor's right. We should be trying to find a way to fix this problem. That, to me, is the biggest priority facing this committee. And as to this panel, I'll listen, but I'll end where I started. It's not our job to decide these things. And if you're a parent, don't be intimidated.